jump out of planes, jump off a cliff, whatever it is, I'm your girl.
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. And I have an adventure for you today. A friend of mine, Q Carrillo from Kearney, Arizona, and she was one of our trail angels when we were on the Arizona Trail. We met her in March of 2023. She found us on the Arizona Trail Facebook group and said, "Come stay with us when you get to Kearney." We found out later that Q is the biggest trail angel on the Arizona Trail and really does it for the love of meeting people. And she said she doesn't even think about it as service, but it's just something that they have done in order to put a little bit more adventure into their life. And so Q is telling us not only her story of the service and the giving back that she does for people who are hiking these long trails and need rides places, need to go into town to pick up some more food. It's a different culture. And when we first started hiking and thinking about long trails, I honestly was one of those people who said, "Oh, how do you even get water out on trail? I mean, how are you getting food? Are you shooting squirrels along the way? I mean, how do you carry that much stuff?" But really what it is, it's every 3 to 5 days you're having to go back into a town to do a resupply. Either you're mailing yourself food, or you're stopping at a gas station to pick up food, or somebody needing to drive you around, you're hitchhiking, grab a hotel while you're at it, do some laundry, basically restock, repack your backpack, buy things that you might need or fix things that might be broken, and then getting back out on trail. And so the trail angels are a really integral part of the trail culture, being able to ferry people back and forth. And we met many trail angels along the way. But because is so prolific in hosting people in her home, she really hears so many stories on the trail and is a great embodiment of somebody who is giving back sometimes as an adventure, even in and of itself. And so we talked a lot about how getting control of your money by having passive income or being able to support yourself and start to think a little bit bigger than just how we're going to pay our bills this month is what ultimately gives us control over our time. And then asking ourselves, what are we going to do with that time? And Q was really able to sit back before she was retired and think to herself, what do I want my life to be like? What do I want my life to look like? As her husband was deployed overseas, her children had moved out, and just kind of thinking, what comes next for us? And really being more intentional about planning out adventures, making the time and the money for it, not making excuses. And I find the story just to be really inspiring. She's been collecting these stories for several years now from many different hikers, all the way from very wealthy executives down to homeless hikers who are basically surviving on the charity of trail angels just so that they can have a place to live as they hike up and down the trails. We talk about the categories of hikers and how they're able to make this adventure happen. Surprisingly, there aren't that many of us who are hiking out there on passive income. Usually it's some sort of a seasonal sabbatical. They quit a job in between jobs, or the traveling lifestyle from odd job to odd job is much more common. And it just goes to show that if there's something that we really want to do, something that's unique or unusual, that we can find a way to figure it out. You don't have to build your rental income portfolio empire before you go out and start serving people or going on more adventures. And so Q's story of how she found the way that she wants to serve and the way that she wants to adventure herself, how she pays for it, and how she's seen so many other people pay for it is really a great lesson and inspiration. Okay, we're live with Q Carrillo. I actually don't even know if I'm pronouncing your last name right. So I say it's
Yes.
Q Carrillo. We have known each other since what you say last March. We met on the Arizona Trail. You are what people refer to as a trail angel, meaning a volunteer who helps people who are doing these long distance hikes like the Appalachian Trail, the Arizona Trail, have a place to stay overnight, clean up, do laundry, get shuttled around, just helping with whatever we need, at especially some accommodations. And so you were our trail angel, especially on our daughter's birthday when she was turning 11. And you went above and beyond to make sure that she had a great birthday because she was not happy to be out there on trail on her birthday. And
Yes.
I was just really drawn to your story because you have embodied service and trail service in a way that I've very few other trail angels can really compare to. Just your willingness to have people into your home and hosting. And like I said, going above and beyond for people. And you've collected just an amazing amount of great stories. And so one of the things that you said that really wanted me to invite you onto the podcast is the age-old question that we all get asked. It's like, how are you affording this? How are you doing this? And we said passive income. We have rental homes and we live on passive income. And you said, I don't even know what passive income, but a guy who hiked through here a couple of days ago said the same thing. You need to meet him. And so that was Nick Fowler, and I interviewed him on the show a couple of weeks ago after he finished the Pacific Crest Trail and did his fastest known time there. Fascinating story about how he got started. And I thought it was so funny how you said, I don't even know what passive income is, but you're hearing people using this term. And so, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience, like what led you to this type of service and what your life was looking like before, during, and now not quite after. We can get into that a little bit later. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got down this path.
Been married to my husband for 38 years, have 4 kids, 6 grandkids. In our young life, we were poor. We survived. I was blessed to be able to be home with our kids, but it also didn't leave us much money. And we just learned that, like you and I have talked before, you just did what you had to do to get through. The one thing I did is give my kids top ramen unless they wanted it. I was better at it than that. I did grow up in a home where I never needed or wanted for anything. My husband, not as much, but both of us were middle income homes when we were young. And so I think it was hard for us to not know how to do that. But we learned the tricks and you just learn to survive and go through. Then our kids all graduated from high school, got married, moved on. Our youngest was graduating from high school. We had been living up in the White Mountains of Arizona and decided that we were done there. For me, it was much too cold. I have some medical issues that the cold kind of makes worse. And we decided to come home. This was home. We had both been born and raised here in outside the Phoenix area in Mesa and just decided it was time. And even though where we were living has been in my family since we were part of Mexico. So Arizona born, through and through, forever and ever. But came here, came back to the heat where we love and moved to a place called Florin. My husband is his civilian job is he works for Department of Corrections. And I went to work for Pinal County. And so anyway, but my hiking story or the beginning of my hiking story is Thanksgiving of 2014, Jeff and I and our youngest son, Camden, were getting ready to have Thanksgiving. And he said, "Hey, mom, what are we going to do today? Because we do enchiladas. We don't do the whole Thanksgiving feast. We're an enchilada kind of family. And so you have all day to do stuff. We usually go to the movies, but we wanted to do something. Jeff and I, every day on our way to work, would pass this little tiny mountain and it had a pyramid at the top. And I said, let's go up and look at that funny little mountain and see what's going on. And it's called Poston Butte. And when we started hiking it, very few people knew about it. And nobody hiked it really. Usually when I was out there, I was the only one. And now it's a really well known place. Anyway, from that day forward, and the story is my husband and son pushed me up this little mountain and then kept me from falling down as we came down. And every living moment that I had off of work, I was hiking that little tiny mountain. And then I started branching out because of Jeff's job. I was having to do it a lot on my own. And at first that was scary. It was like, I don't know how to do this. But then I did. And man, I met this amazing hiking community that we have. That's such an incredible place. And then I moved from one position at Pinal County to another, and a friend that I met there, her and I started talking, and we realized we had lots in common. And one of those things was hiking. And she said to me, "Hey, how about we go hiking?" And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Where do we want to go?" And she mentioned the Florence Calvin trailhead and out here. And she told me how to get there. If you know where it is, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And so I pull up and there's this big, beautiful sign made out of metal. And I get out and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I wonder what this Arizona trail thing is. Again, Arizona native, no idea what this is. And so we hike about 3 miles in, 3 miles out. We hike, come out, I get home and I start looking up what this Arizona trail is. And this is probably when she's got to be 28, 4 years after I'd started hiking. And anyway, start looking up what the Arizona Trail is, and I realize it is 800 miles across the state of Arizona. And my initial thought is, these people are crazy. And so I'm like, wow, this is crazy. While we were there, she had showed me there is a bear box there for water. And she had told me that people bring water and leave it for the hikers that are hiking the trail. And I'm thinking, okay, we can do that. It's just water. And it gets us out to this beautiful country, which a lot of people think that the Arizona desert is ugly. If you haven't been here, you got to come.
True.
And so my husband and I start usually once a week or every couple of weeks, we would bring a couple of gallons of water. So we're thinking, here we are in the middle of July bringing water out. And we're thinking, man, these people are just stupid. That cannot believe they're hiking in July. So this was before we realized there were seasons for the trail. So that's how we started. And then I belong to, or we both belong to, a Facebook group called Dirtbag Gypsies. And there was a gentleman on there who was getting ready to hike the trail. And he had been posting about it. And I said, hey, when you get to the Florence Kelvin trailhead or get close, let us know. We'll bring you trail magic. Because again, I've been researching, found this cool thing called trail magic, which is where people bring and leave snacks and stuff for hikers. And that's magic because they're out there in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden they walk up
Yeah,
and maybe there's a soda or a beer or a candy. It's magic.
it is,
Yes.
especially when you're hiking with kids. It was very magical to find those stashes.
Yeah. So anyway, so he and it just as COVID hit, he was hiking. And so we meet him. Well, we get there and he wasn't there and he was able to message us and he said, hey, I'm at least 5 miles from the trailhead. We said, no worries. We're going to leave it here. It was in a cooler because it had a couple of beers in it and some candy, my favorite Easter candy and because it was really close to Easter and a couple of other things for him. And we left it in the cooler and left it in the bear box. We now know that's a no. We didn't know that was a no at the time. So we leave it. He gets it. He posts about it. And so we were glad he got it and created a friendship with this gentleman, real nice guy. And then after that, when he hit Roosevelt, he had to get off the trail because pretty much the whole world had shut down. And so anyway, that was our beginning into how we got into doing it at the time. Again, we didn't know about trail angels. We didn't know any of that. I'd heard it, but that wasn't what we were. We were just people helping. And then in 20, Jeff was deployed to Kuwait with the Arizona Army National Guard and was gone. And so and again, it was COVID, so everything shut down. But the great thing about what I do, and at the time I wasn't working, I'd had a major injury and had left my job and was just getting better. And luckily, our kids were grown. Jeff makes really good money when he is deployed. And I just got to play for a year while he was gone. And boy, did I play, went everywhere, did everything. And so I just hiked and went to different sections of the trail. And I just learned more and more about it. And of course, during that time, there's nobody hiking it. There might have been maybe a few that were pretty hardcore, but the rest of them, it's so hard when you weren't able to go into a store, or you weren't able to find a place to shower. People weren't letting you into their homes. Had we lived here, we would have let you, but we weren't. It was just a really hard time but I still continue to develop friendships through Facebook, through Instagram. I started learning about the PCT and it kind of grabbed my attention. I thought, man, wouldn't that be cool too? Not that I will ever be able to hike a long trail. For me, it's not because mentally I can't do it. It is I have a lot of physical. My spine is completely full of metal. It would just be my longest day is 17 miles, and that's a long day. And I know some of you hike way more than that in a day. And so for me, I learned all the necessities. And then when Jeff got home or was starting to come home in 21, the housing market hit and we had not liked where we had lived for a while because it had a HOA. And we're not really HOA people.
No.
Don't tell me how to live because I'm going to buck every system I can. And at the time we had a boat and we couldn't keep our boat at our home. We had For a short time, we had a little RV. We couldn't keep the RV at the house. All these things that they tell you you can't, you have to have so many plants in your front yard. I'm sorry, that's just not who we are. And so I told him I'm selling the house. Granted, like I said, he's still overseas. He's thinking I'm crazy, if you know me. And I literally sell the house without it ever hitting the market. Our neighbors directly across the street were also selling their home. So we've been talking a lot. And I told her, hey, I've got to wait just a little while because we wanted to coordinate it with Jeff getting home so he could help me pack since he was a professional mover in his past life. And I didn't like doing that. So we did coordinate it anyway. About 2 weeks before I was getting ready to put it on the market, the other neighbor across the street comes over, knocks on the door, and he says, "Hey, I hear you might be selling your home." And I said, "Yes." Put it on the market in 2 weeks. And he goes, "I'll take it." And I said, "The thing you've got to know is it's going as is. We're not touching it." I said, "My husband's been out of the country. We just don't have the time. We're just selling it." And he goes, "I will take it. What do you want?" And so we knew how much the neighbor had sold theirs for. We added several $1,000s onto that, and
Mm.
he took it. And it was a done deal, never hit the market. But then the other issue came into play, which was because our initial thought was to move to Roosevelt. Again, we love boating, we love being on the water, tons of hiking up in that area, just anything to be outdoors. And so I start going up and looking every weekend. We do have a realtor, but he was a military friend and charging us nothing basically to help sell our home. And so I didn't feel like I could ask him to drive because he lived in Glendale. And I'm not going to ask him to drive 2 hours, 3 hours to take me to places in the Globe area. I get up to Roosevelt, start looking, and what we find is the majority of places in Roosevelt are modular homes. If you know anything about using a VA loan, you cannot purchase a modular home with a VA loan. It must be brick and mortar or stick. So then that took that out of the plane because the mortar homes up there are super expensive, like
Yeah.
out of our range.
Waterfront.
And not only that, it's just him and I, and we didn't need a 5,000 square foot home. Anyway, so then we start looking in Superior. The problem with it is, as everybody knows at that time, you would literally go see a home and it would be gone almost before you were there. So I have a girlfriend, actually my very first girlfriend who hiked with me on the Arizona Trail, Carolyn. She lives here in Kearney. And she says, "Hey, have you ever thought about Kearney?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." And she says, sorry, I just realized my watch is going. And she says, "There's some homes here." And I'm thinking, I don't know. I'd only been here like 2 or 3 times. She goes, "Come out, spend the day with me. We'll drive around." Like, okay. So I come out. As I'm driving, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this drive is gorgeous." And at the time, I wasn't working, didn't really think about a job at the time. And then, even though I knew I would be going back to work when Jeff got home. Anyways, we come out, look around, and I'm like, I could do this. It's totally surrounded by mountains, beautiful little place. And so we find the house after going to see many ugly homes. But I walk in, actually, I come in the back doors and stand in the backyard because I knew that would be a very integral part of our life is being outdoors. And there was a cute little gazebo at the time, not the one we have now, and I sat down, I had my chair in the back seat or in my car and sat down and I could still see the mountains. And I thought I could sit here. I could sit here all night long. And came in, saw the house was okay. It's just a house. I've never been really like, oh, gotta have this house. I'm not that person. Anyway, so I take a video, I send it to Jeff, and we decide this is our place. And before Jeff ever gets home, he goes, "Hey, what do you think about opening our house for Arizona trail hikers? We'll be just off the trail." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's talk about that when you get home, when we get settled." And so we moved into this house in April of 21. And Jeff literally had gotten home March 31st, I think it was. He got home, we got packed, we got moved. On April, we moved in, put all of our stuff in the house, and on April 22nd, him and I took off for a month. We call it our reintegration travel, and we went to New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, and then came home and just stopped and hiked and talked and got to know each other again because when they're gone for that long, and at that time, he'd actually been gone almost 3 full years,
Wow.
2 years, 2 years on the border mission, and then it followed immediately into his Kuwait. And then he got home. We got home. I started immediately. No, I didn't look for a job yet. He went back to work with Department of Corrections. About a week later, we got the house set. Had to do some pretty major things. We had to completely redo the electrical here and then some plumbing stuff, and then started on the house, getting it ready and doing things. And then it quickly became, we don't really care. We're not going to stay here forever because then our retirement plan clicked into gear. But then we started talking about being trail angels and actually having our home open for those that wanted to come. Again, at the time, we still didn't know there was seasons. There's a northbound or no-go season that you guys did. And then there's a southbound or so-go season that starts in about September, October. And so here we are in May, and we found on Facebook there is a Arizona Trails Facebook page where people hiking the trail can get on and talk to each other. We can get on there and let you know what we're doing. There's also an app called Far Out that I found out about, jumped on there and added our information. And anyway, and we got just because we weren't getting any hits, we weren't getting anybody to call, we weren't, and we're thinking, isn't that funny that nobody's coming, even though we're thinking it's crazy, it's hot out there. When they want to come in out of the heat. And anyway, come to find out, there's a season.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew the exact date. Oh, I could probably find it. Our very first hiker, his name was the Jesus. And he called or sent a text, I can't remember. And I think it was October. I know it was 21. And he just said, "Hey, I saw you on the Facebook and looking for a place to maybe throw down my bag for a few days." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we were so excited. Jeff was at work. I text him, "Oh my gosh, so excited. We got our first hiker." So I went out to the trailhead and picked him up, brought him back. That first wave of, "Oh, this hiker's been hiking a day or two."
Yeah.
A whole different thing.
It's so
Now we're
bad.
so used to it, we don't. Anyway, brought him in, showed him the house, and like I said, this was new, so we just were like, "Hey, dude, you're our first guy." And him and I sat in the backyard and visited after he'd cleaned up and started his laundry, got his pack kind of redone. And he started telling, I just said, "Tell me about you." He was a young man who his job was he works for in Wyoming. I can't remember the name, but anyway, one of the ski resorts there. So during the winter, he was just almost done. And because he was going south, which most
Mhm.
were going north. Or sorry, he was going north, most were coming south. So he was
Okay.
getting done. He was starting, but going the opposite way of the majority
Mhm.
because when he got done, he was just going home to start the
Okay.
ski season. So he might have been here in September then. Anyway, so he starts telling me about he tells me he's a triple crowner. I'm thinking, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that means.
No small thing,
So
but yeah, not well known. It's not a horse race.
and like I said, this is my very first hiker, and I'm thinking, so I asked him, what does that mean? And he tells me it is that he's done the PCT, the AT, and the CDT, which are all like over 2,500 miles long each. And it's crazy,
Yeah.
craziness. So
Well,
in my mind, I'm
for the
thinking,
let me just interject here for a second and just explain to the listener who may not be a hiker the monumental nature of the Triple Crown. It's the whole entire Appalachian Trail, which is almost 2,300 miles. It goes from Georgia all the way to Maine. The Continental Divide Trail goes from Mexico to Canada, again 2,500 miles, and then the Pacific Crest Trail goes from Mexico to Canada up the west coast, so through California, Oregon, and Washington. These are long trails. They take months and months to do, and you need some pretty crazy people to do it. So the fact that he's done all 3 and now he's out on the Arizona Trail,
right,
that's a huge accomplishment and something that a lot of us we didn't even know existed when we first started this. And the exceptional people that think that this kind of thing is a good idea and that it's fun. And then the natural questions that arise from that because it's so out there and it's so weird that even you're sitting there with your first hiker going, "Tell me about yourself." And he's saying things you're like, "What?" And that must have just been the first of many experiences. Just be like,
Yes, yeah, and I'd even said to him, I said, "'Cause I'm always curious, like, how did you get into hiking?" Asked him that, and he said, funny thing, he says, "The Appalachian Trail was always in our backyard. We just didn't know anything about it." He said, "My brother calls me up one day and says, 'Hey, have you ever heard of this thing called the Appalachian Trail? How about we hike it?'" Neither of them have ever hiked, maybe a little here and there. They go to Walmart, buy all of their yeah, exactly, your face. They buy all of their gear and they start backwards from where everybody else starts. So they get wherever I can't remember. They get there. They leave their packs at the bottom. They hike to the top of the first low summit where everybody's usually done and they're just
mhm,
starting. And they get up there and they realize, shoot, we didn't bring up any water with us. And they're,
yeah,
tired. So a couple people at the top, as hikers do, share. Got anyway. When they got back down, there was a Forest Service station right there, and one of the gentlemen in there said, "So what are you doing, sweet?" They tell him, and he's with those packs. You're gonna hike this with those packs. Anyway, so just his story was incredible, and then anyway, and it just rolled from there. And then, oh, and back to the original. So his name is the Jesus. Again, those of you that are not hikers won't know. Hikers in the United States, which we found this is a United States thing, it's not
mhm.
a foreign country thing. You get trail names, and that was his trail name. And it's a cool thing. So anyway, but it just rolled from there. That first year, I think we were lucky if we had maybe 20 people. We weren't keeping track at the time. And again, then we also learned, oh wait, there's seasons. So we had people in October, a few people in early November that first year, and that was really it. Then in 22, we had in the spring when they start about maybe mid February, March, we had maybe 50, 75 people. And the biggest week we have found happens to coincide with my birthday, which is March 22nd. And the night of my birthday in 22, was our biggest night. And I think we had seven. And I came home with a cake and we did shots in the house. Anyway, let's put it this way. I stayed up till 1 o'clock in the morning,
A party.
way too late to get up to go to work the next morning at 4 a.m. But it's evolved because we've learned how to do it. We've
Mhm.
learned how to do this thing, and we have just fell in love. We get asked all the time, "Why do you do it?" Because we ask questions, and everybody always says to us, "Why do you do it? Why do you let strangers into your home?" And our thing is this, this we cannot tell you hikers enough. The joy you bring to us outweighs anything that we do for you, at least on our side. It is just thinking about all those that have come through our home, the energy that you bring to our home, the kindness. We've had people, I think just after you guys left, we had a whole group. There were like seven of them. They stayed for 3 days. They cooked for us every day. They cleaned our house. It was just craziness because, as I tell most of our hikers, I don't cook. So you're on your own.
Yeah.
You can use the kitchen, but I'm not cooking for you. So it's been great. And then in 2023, this when you guys came through, we actually started keeping track of all of our hikers. And we had 202 hikers through our home from February 27th to April 27th. So in two
Unbelievable.
months, 202 hikers were in our home. Our biggest night was 17 hikers at one time in our home. And they were literally, you've been at our house. That's a lot of people in this house.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
were, I think, 3 or 4 stayed in the yard, couple maybe on the back patio. But yeah, so it just brings us such joy. And this year we've actually got to have, I think, two, maybe three that started with you guys in the
Mhm.
Sobo season, but because of the, or sorry, Nobo season. But because of the weather this year, they got off trail because some of them are on time constraint and just can't do it. And so Casey, who's from Pennsylvania, his trail
Mhm.
name is Bougie. Yeah,
Yeah.
he got his trail name here at our house, and because he is bougie.
Yeah.
Uh,
He didn't look bushy when we met him because we were just sitting by the
oh
side of a
yeah,
creek. But
yeah,
yeah, when we asked him the age-old question, like, "How are you doing this? How are you paying for it?" And he was one of the sabbatical
yes,
categories where
correct,
he was able to just collect time off work and go.
yes,
And I think that you start to see these categories of people
yeah,
as time goes by, who's out there who is very wealthy and they're either doing some sort of, I quit my job for a year, I'll figure it out later when I get back. You have the people who have an actual sabbatical, like what Intel does, where they just let you go off for a few months every couple years. And then all the way down to people who are doing seasonal work. That was pretty common. People traveling
hmm,
around doing seasonal work. It's just like with RVers, they go stay at a campground, they work for a few months and they move on. So we
yeah,
did see a lot of that, all the way down to abject poverty, almost homeless, basically hiking
yes,
the trail, and they're surviving from the donations that if we have extra stuff, we leave it in a box. And so you
right,
keep a hiker box at your house. Hey, that we haven't been eating this. Let's throw it in here and people can come and fish through it. And they're basically
correct,
surviving from hiker box to hiker box. And I saw the gamut
yes,
financially. And it was almost like a great equalizer on the trail. Like some of us could tell who was wealthy and who wasn't wealthy based on the gear that they were
correct,
carrying. But at the end of the day, we're all filthy, we're all stinky, we're all doing the same thing. And how we were making it work had a thousand variations of how people were taking the time off to be able to pay for this trip. And I found that to be fascinating,
yes,
especially because we hiked with our kids.
yeah,
And there aren't kids on the Arizona Trail, at least not doing the through hike, that we found very few. But for our kids to be able to talk to these other adults and just say, "Tell me about yourself. Tell me what you do," because in their teenage years discovering these future careers, and I
right,
want to them to be exposed to a lot of stories and a lot of people. And I think that's something that they got from your house, because not only were they meeting the hikers there in the home, but you have collected a vast amount of stories. Are you planning on someday, I know you've mentioned it,
yeah.
about putting a book together from the trail angel perspective, because people write books from the hiker perspective. There are several of those, but I've never seen one from your point of view and sharing your stories. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And is there a theme that you're mulling around or a future project?
We have, it's just one of these things that I think actually one of my hikers suggested it. Maybe you just one day, or no, you know who? It was our son. So when we first got into this, our youngest son is probably our closest because he's single. And so he travels with us a lot when we travel. We call him our Gladys. There's a long story behind that, but that's what we call him. And when we first started this, I will tell you, we had friends, we had family, him especially. He was like, are you crazy? What do you mean you're letting strange people into your house?
Homeless
And
people.
I'm like, listen, and most of the people, because like at work, I would say, oh, I've got a hiker. They're just going to the house. And they're like, do you mean you just let them into your house? I'm like, yes. And they were like, don't you worry about them stealing. I'm like, they're hiking 800 miles. I promise they're
They
not
don't want your
planning
stuff.
to pack. If anything, most of them leave
Leave
stuff
you stuff.
with. So it's been funny. So that's anyway, but Camden, after he got comfortable and he knew that this was a thing, it was going to happen and he couldn't stop us. He said one day, probably a year in, he goes, Mom, have you ever thought about writing a book? He said, you are getting to meet people from literally all over the world. And wow, they have some incredible stories. And no, I would have never in my life, I've never thought about writing a book. I have friends that have talked about it, but I'm like, no, that's not me. But now that I've done it and we've done this incredible thing, yes, I do think about it. And I jokingly tell Jeff, it's how we'll retire. I'll write it. What? Then that'll be our income. Not that many people are going to buy it, but whatever. But my thought is that I will tell my story as someone who I am someone who could very well sit on the couch and never get off the couch. I have so many health issues to the person I am today who doesn't let anything keep me down. Jump out of planes, jump off a cliff, whatever it is, I'm your girl. And hiking has been, as it is for most of us, hiking is so good for our mental health. And if people just understood the power of the outdoors and just being out there in nature, I don't know if Becky Helmsley, I think is her name. She has this poem, and there is a part in the poem that says, I was with the trees and they just let me breathe. And I think, isn't that true? And I think about that on my really hard days at work. I just want to be out there with the trees so they can just let me breathe. But yeah, so I have thought about it. I typed out a few of the stories that have been left with us, and I'll get there someday. It's just, I just get busy doing a million other things. And, but the book is definitely in my mind. But one of the things you talked about was how people are doing this. And it has been, and that was to me one of the biggest things because I'm like, I know this isn't cheap. First off, if you've ever done any research, if you're not a hiker and you've gone to a hiking store or REI or any outdoor store, I'm sorry, the gear is just outrageously expensive. Yeah.
The
This is
less the ways, the more it costs.
exactly. That this is not a cheap hobby. And so then you're away from home. You're having to shop wherever there's a store.
Yep.
And in some of these small towns, they charge you more than in big towns because we're out in the middle of literally no. I think our cute little store here, Norms, does pretty good. I think I know
Yeah,
they
they were one of the better ones in the small town for sure.
yeah, and I
Actual
will tell
grocery
you,
store.
they are so conscious of what you guys might need while you're
Mhm.
here. I think our whole little town is that way. We like to say we're the friendliest town on AZT.
It is.
Yeah,
It is. It's definitely a trail town where the trail culture, everybody there knows it. There were a lot of places we hiked into that they'd see us, they'd think we were homeless, ask what we were doing. We say we're hiking the Arizona Trail. And even people who grew up in Arizona, who grew up in these towns or live in
yeah,
these towns that are along the trail, be like, what is that? But
yeah,
Kearney, y'all got it figured out over there.
we do. Yeah, yes, yes. But one of the things, so I ask three questions when hikers come to my home. Actually, Casey said to me the night that we did it with him here, he goes, "Oh, the queen is holding court." And so that's become the joke is we sit together and I ask the questions and we go around. If there's a lot of people here, we just go around the circle. My questions are, what's your real name? What's your trail name? And where are you from? And how did you get that hiker name? What do you do for a living? How is it you're able to be up here and be gone from your job anywhere from 2 months to 4 or 5 months? Depends on how long it takes people. And then what other long trails have they done? Because while we've heard about trails, we never in our lives heard about tour people. And you're like you said, we've had everybody from said our very first hiker, he's a seasonal worker. So he does his seasonal work. And then we have like Casey, who is executive at a large corporation and got time off and took that time off. To literally one night, I get a text from a girlfriend here in town, and she says, "Hey, Q," she says, "we met a hiker. He's looking for a place to stay for the night. Are you guys taking hikers in?" Because it was a little bit out of season, but here's the deal 24/7, 365. You need a place to roll. Here we are. And so I said, yeah, absolutely. So I was still at work. Jeff was here. And when I get home, he meets me outside and he goes, "This isn't a hiker." And I'm like, "What do you mean this isn't a hiker?" And he goes, "No, he's just traveling the country." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So like he's an adventurer." Okay. And I'm like, anyway, he was a little bit odd. But he was one of those that there was really no money. And he had been, I think he was 22, and he had told Jeff he had been doing this since he was 16 and just goes. And like you said, gets little jobs here and there to pay, or like us, people that are nice enough to let him shower and all that. I will tell you, it was the first time I felt a little uncomfortable in my home because Jeff works nights and so I was here alone. But I didn't it wasn't like I was afraid of him. It was because he wasn't a trail hiker. I don't know. There was just this mind game from you. Anyway, but then when I met you, which was funny because like you said, I'd met Nick just, I don't know, a week earlier or so. When we asked him that, he told us same thing that he passive income. And then he went into a little bit about they had homes here and there and that. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then you came and said the same thing, and I'm like, okay, I got to hear more about this. And you and I have been talking all the way you guys were coming here. So I felt a little more comfortable with you. And anyhow, but it was interesting to hear your side. And the way we're able to do what we do is we live pretty frugally. We don't really, other than our vacations and that, we don't really spend a lot of money. And both
You
of
really
us make
prioritize experiences. Like, when we met you, you were a member of the Gypsy Club, and you were leaving a couple of days later to go jumping out of an airplane or going parasailing, I think.
I was
You
going
really
parasailing. Or
Yeah, so
no, I
you're
was going, oh my goodness, well, you jump off a cliff and
like base jumping? Did you go
no,
base
no,
jumping?
no, no, that is one stupid I'm not doing.
Hang
Um,
hang gliding,
it's
parasailing,
paragliding. Paragliding.
paragliding.
That's what I was going to do. So in April, the Dirtbag Gypsies do an adventure challenge, and there's
Mhm.
7 things to do, and that was one of them. So 2 years ago, I jumped out of a plane, and this year I jumped off a cliff. And then
Yes.
I also learned to rappel this year.
Nice.
And yeah, yeah. So we love to adventure. That's our thing. A little thing about trail angels. We are not to be considered a trail angel. You are not to ask for money up front. To not to
Mhm.
say, if you come to my home, you are to pay me X amount of dollars to stay here to do your laundry. And when we set this up, when we first moved in, that was one of our discussions was, and again,
Mhm.
at the time, we didn't know that was part of being a trail angel. And we just said, listen, we want to offer these people that have been out in the dirt and the dirt and not got to shower and their clothes are dirty and maybe it's been raining and they're muddy and they're yucky. And we want to offer them a home. We want them to walk in here and literally feel they can do whatever they need to do. Come in, do their laundry. We will provide the laundry soap. Come in and take a shower. Take 2 or 3 showers. It's okay. We will have the soap and the shampoos and whatever you might need. For us, those are the little tiny things that we can provide for you guys. But again, thankfully, we're in a place in our lives where we can afford that. And it doesn't bite into what we're doing enough to make it noticeable. But very shortly, actually, I think the very first guy, as he was getting ready to leave the next morning with Gary, who's another one of our trail angels here, that's amazing, he said, "Hey, can I leave you some money?" And I looked at him and I said, "We don't expect you to do that." And he goes, I know and I appreciate that. He says, "But can I leave a donation?" And I'm like, "Sure, if you want to." So he did. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. People are going to maybe do this. Okay. And again, we just set the money aside, didn't think too much of it. And anyway, as we got into it, we realized most people, not everybody, because not everybody can afford it, but most people are going to leave us some sort of donation. And up until this year, we hadn't been using Venmo because we were like, we really don't. But so many this year were like, hey, do you have Venmo? And I'm like, yeah. So now we have a little thing that's printed out with my QR code, but we never ask and we never expect because we do this because it's the joy. One of the things going with your passive income, one of the things we do with that money is set aside and we do not touch it for any living expenses for us. That money is set aside and we only use that money for Jeff and I to adventure because we figure it is going right back out into the adventuring community. And that's what we want. But we never, ever, like I've still got all the money from our Sobo people that came through. And they all came through and no one was here. The house was just opened. I did have to find a key. Never had a key to my house. So I had to find a key to my house. And they would like you guys, how it happens is somebody calls or texts me. I have like a format and I just send it to them and it tells them how to get into the house and how to find the back room, how to do the laundry, who to call if they need some help. And our spring season will be very much like that because I'm going to be in Europe visiting Jeff, who is deployed currently to Poland. So, yeah, so that's
It's such a unique setup and such a unique situation. Any Anybody who does any of these kind of hikes and is in this hiking community knows trail magic, trail angels, but to have the home on trail the way that you do, I've never hiked the Appalachian Trail. This is our first long trail that we did, and the last one with our kids for sure. So we don't know exactly how it is, but from what people tell me, other Arizona trail hikers who have hiked other trails, what you have set up is quite unique in the just homey atmosphere. I don't even know the right word. I'm stumbling over my words here just because it's so unique to just say, come, stay, we have what you need. I've had plenty of people reach out and shuttle us for a fee, or we didn't really stay over at a lot of people's houses because not very many people are doing what you're doing. And I felt, I don't know, it was just so big hearted. And one of the things I struggled with on the trail was asking for help. And I felt like if we're out here hiking on passive income, we should have enough where we can just be like throwing money at all the trail angels and pay for all the hotels and expensive shuttles and things like that. But we had just left our job. I
Right.
just barely. And we didn't really know how long the money that we had was gonna last, and so I think that it put us in a position financially where we weren't able to do as much as we wanted to do, and so I was trying not to ask anybody for help, and when I was, even at your house, I just try to stay out of people's way, just go back in your just stay in the room and don't bother anybody, and so it was a real struggle for me to ask for help, and I asked you about it, especially with the people hiking the trail who have means, and you're putting yourself out there to serve people who could afford to go get a hotel or get a maybe not in Kearney, I don't know if they have
Yeah.
Ubers, but they have means to take care of themselves, yet they're looking
Yes.
for quote unquote service or
Yes.
volunteers to put yourself out to help people who have means and how you're able to handle that. And the answer you gave me, I want you to share that here, how you are able to just give of yourself and you don't really seem to care how much money someone has or doesn't have, if they need help or if they can afford help elsewhere. How do you balance that in your brain about about what you're doing as a trail angel?
So I guess for me is I just think that we're all on this earth, I think, for different reasons. I am not really religious, I'm more spiritual. And that's really just come in the last probably 5, 6 years. And I think that if I put my good energy out there to the world, it's only going to come back to me. And other than literally two people out of probably 400 or 500 people that we've had in our home, we have had bad experiences with two people. And unfortunately, that was this last year. But the Arizona Trail is also getting much busier. So we're going to
Mhm.
see that a little bit more in May. But for us, I think it just truly comes down to there's nothing we have that if we lost it, it's going to change our life
Yeah.
because our goal in 2.5 more years is to sell everything we have anyway.
Mhm.
And or the majority of what we have, where our goal is what you guys are doing. We're going to buy a truck and a trailer and we're just going to travel. The last 2 years since I've gone to work full time, I get 2 weeks off. I work for an elementary school and I get 2 weeks off in the summer. And a year ago, we went to Colorado for 18 days and we had the most incredible time. We just traveled and did and camped, and we're still tent campers. We still do that, even though we're old. You can see this, we're old, but we love it. And then this past year, we went and did the Eastern Sierra and went up to Yosemite and that whole area. And while we're out there, we get to meet these incredible people out there, whether they're on the trail or in the camp place we're near. We try to stay out of campgrounds, but in California, it's hard to do that. It's very
Yeah.
different there than Colorado. We were out in the middle of no a lot. So I think for us, it's just if we put that out there, that'll come back to us. And we know that. And again, you come into my home and you take something, I'm going to feel like you need it. I grew up, my grandpa, who lived in the White Mountains, they never locked their home ever.
Mhm.
And his philosophy was if somebody comes in here and takes what they needed it worse than I did. And I
Mhm.
think that's just been my philosophy. We get people ask us all the time, what do you mean you leave your house open?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
still might cry, might be sad, but if you come and you come into my home and you steal the apples on the counter or you steal a beer or whatever, you know what? It's not a big deal. There's nothing in this house that's that important. maybe the dog. Jeff
Yeah.
isn't really sad if someone took the dog.
Dog. Yeah.
Yeah. That is just, I think that's our mentality. And to be honest with you, I've not always been that person. There was a time when we locked our house, didn't matter. But now there's nothing here that's, you know what? Because I think our mindset is so changed. Our
Mhm.
mindset is we just want to be out adventuring the world. And part of our hope while we adventure is that we will go to the Appalachian Trail and we will go to the PCT and the Colorado Trail and all of these fun trails and do 5 or 10 miles on them and then
Mhm.
sit and do trail magic. That's our
Yes.
hope. We hope to
Yes.
continue, even though we won't have a home anymore, we hope to continue to be trail angels. One of the things that, and we would love to sell our home to someone who would leave it open for trail people. That would be our greatest thing to be able to leave that for someone else to do. This past year, we had a hiker here. Her name was Red. That was her trail name. And she was from Chihuahua, Mexico. And her and
Mhm.
I were sitting on the back porch chatting.
We hiked with her
And
for probably a week.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
yes.
She made us
And
all look bad because she was so beautiful.
oh, yes. We were visiting, and she, of course, was asking how we do this and da da da, why we do this. Everybody seems to do. And she said she has an Airbnb at her place in Chihuahua.
Mhm.
And she said, and I said, well, why do you do that? And I said, is it for the income? And she goes, no, really, it isn't. She said, I'm gone so much traveling the world that I just decided this was something I could do and it would maybe help pay the bills a little bit, but I'm do it for that. And she
Mhm.
goes, but man, the people we get to meet. And I said, oh, it's the same. And
Yeah.
she said something that I'm actually currently at this time having a sign made for our back patio. And she said to me, she says, I get to host the world in my house. And at that very minute, I thought, I get to host the world in my backyard. And so I'm having a sign made with it's got the world map on it and it's going to say, we host the world in our backyard. And so it is said, and I will tell you the funny thing this year for those going solo, I helped a hiker out last week. I
Mhm.
had a hiker here the day before Christmas. So they're going longer and longer, which is
Mm.
interesting.
The gear's getting better.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that again, Arizona, because of our, especially here where we are, you guys know the desert is cold at night.
Yeah.
Cold. We're going to hit 19 at night this week. So it's
Wow.
cold. But like I said, so these are the stories. The gal that was here in just before Christmas, Jeff, of course, isn't here. And so when I told him, because she said, oh, I see you have a fancy bike. It's Jeff's, of course. And I said, yes. And she goes, oh, I'm a cyclist. And I'm like, oh, then later, Norms posted on their Facebook feed that, and they've started doing this. They post pictures of the hikers and they said she was a Olympian. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? So then I text Jeff and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's an Olympian. Jeff then dives into it.
Uh-huh.
And her story's incredible, but I wasn't here. I was up at my parents' for Christmas. And so her and I just text back and forth. And here's the other great thing. We had so many open invitations to go visit so many places in the world.
Yep.
We helped out a couple from Bosnia earlier this year. If you know anything, Bosnia is right next to Poland. They might come see us while I'm in Poland. So, yeah, so it's just literally, I think we've had someone from almost everywhere. No, not Africa. I don't think Russia, but I mean, if we were to keep really, if I went through, we've had people from everywhere. And
Yeah.
it's just been, where else do you get to do this? Where you get to just meet people from everywhere
And
and
they
get to
come
do
to
that.
you.
And they come to me. I don't have to go find them. They
Uh,
come right here. Yep.
I
So,
I wonder, can you tell me a small world story? Because when we were staying with you and we were talking about our time when we lived in Texas, and we said, oh, we're from Kyle, Texas. And Jeff says, my parents live there. And I knew their name because of some community service that they had done in
oh,
the
yes.
area. There was another time that when I was in Roosevelt, I was sitting at a picnic table and one of the hikers there, we were probably talking for maybe 2 hours. And he asked me where I grew up. That finally came up. And I said that I grew up in Kent, Washington. And he says, "Oh, my hiking buddy's from Kent, Washington." And he turned out that his hiking buddy was my high school math teacher.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Yes.
the one that I was the worst with, like the absolute most pain with, and I was a little embarrassed. But I feel like I feel like these small world stories happen. Have you ever had an experience like that where you're like, "Wait, what?"
You know what? We really haven't. That's what's funny. I was thinking that when you first said that, I thought, I don't know that we have. Other than, oh, we were there. And there was a young couple that were here hiking, and they were from Colorado, and they were telling us where they worked, and it was this little bar. And we're like, "Oh, we were there last year." So it's one of those,
Yeah.
we might have seen them, we just don't know it. And but you know what? And that's the thing is but we've had that here. Like our first ever 2 New York hikers both came on the same day. We'd never had New York hikers, and here they were in our front yard living room on the same day. That was funny.
Yeah.
But I think that it is, but I'm sure there will come a day where it will be like, "Oh yeah, we know that." One of the other interesting things we did this past season from your guys' group is, like I said, there were just so many. And we just, when you guys leave, here's the deal. We literally call you our hikers. If we've
Mm,
helped you in any way, you now belong to us. You're now part of our group. And we feel that truthfully, we feel like we've been so blessed to be this little tiny part of your journey that we hope that we get to continue to be part of your journey as you tell the story moving forward. Like with you guys, we met you in Flagstaff
mm,
at an outdoor event.
yes.
And we have lots of them that we still message back and forth, or something happens and we message them, "Hey, da 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 da." Or so it's really fun because we now have millions of or hundreds of friends
Yes.
across the world. Over the summer a lot, we travel, or early, late spring, early summer, we travel a lot. And like when we came up to see you guys, we actually came through Pine and we
Mm.
stopped in Pine at that brewery. And two of the guys, Grill and Chill, who also got their names here, they're brothers. And they had texted us because I didn't know this, but Jeff had a free beer coupon that he had given them and said, "Hey, when you get there, here's a beer on us." And so they had text on our, we were going to stop there anyway. And they had text and they said, "Hey, we're here. We wanted to tell Jeff, thank you." And I said, "Funny, we're headed that way." And they're like,
Yeah.
"No way." By the time we left, there were seven of our hikers that we got to sit and have lunch with and enjoy
Yep.
for a
And
second time.
we had just left, like, that morning. I think you when you texted us, we were still had service, but we were
Mhm.
already back out on the trail, and it was like, "Oh, did we turn around and hike 2 hours back?" Like, we really actually thought about it, and
Right. Yeah.
the kids were like, "No." So it was such a coincidence when you texted, you said you were in Flagstaff, and we were both at the outdoor expo, and so
Right.
we just walk over there, and there you are. I feel
Yes.
like those types of experience, like, you're not gonna have those if you only meet one person or two
Right.
people. You multiply that by hundreds of people, and suddenly these little coincidences start to come up. Like we're both at the same outdoor expo in Flagstaff because we were waiting for the Grand Canyon to open and
Right.
just staying at another trail angel's house who she wasn't there. She just opened up the house to us and suddenly you show up. And it was just a fantastic time to just sit and reminisce and talk about
Right.
stuff that was going on and something that people we never would have met,
Right.
experiences that we never had. And I think that's what makes your story so extraordinary because you're coming at it from the other direction. Like the hike, I don't know, are we gonna write a book? Are we gonna do a vlog? Are we gonna capture this? Yeah. Will it be an amazing story? I sure hope so. But
Right.
you're having these amazing stories to come to you, and you have this repository of friends, and you've met so many more people on trail than I ever will because we hiked with a few people. We certainly didn't meet hundreds and hundreds of people and
Right.
sit down and were able to ask them their story. Maybe a dozen all told when we were
Right.
stuck at the Grand Canyon or something, but
Yeah. Yeah.
hundreds of people you've met and now know
Yeah.
and have these experiences, coincidences with
Correct.
all over the place.
Yes. I always say too, because I always say I'll never be able to hike. And that's the other reason I do this. I can never hike what you guys hike. My big thing is this is that, like I said, I have severe scoliosis. So at the age of 16, I had my first surgery. I had Harrington rods placed 13 years ago, I had my second surgery. They took those out and placed in cages and something else anyway. So my spine, if you look at me, I stand very crooked. I will never stand up straight. And so for me, it would be such an excruciating thing. I also have bad feet and I have bad knees. These are all things that are just not going to happen. And for me, you coming to my home and getting to hike these experiences you're doing, I get to live that hike through your story. And I think that's also where the story or the book idea came from is you are bringing your stories to me and I get to interject my small story with you. And like I said, and the great thing is and most of us that are in the hiking community have traveled because we like to travel other places to hike and all.
Yep.
And even I'm like I said, I'm going to Europe here in a couple of weeks and which just blows my mind.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I would have never left my country. And now I'm going to Europe for 6 weeks. And I have already been researching like where can I find a trail and gonna go hike some of the Camino. And so those are things that without being in the hiking community, I wouldn't have known about. And
Yeah.
it is just this and who knows, I'll get to meet some I've even been thinking I think we're gonna do some trail magic while we're over
Oh, fun.
there.
I feel like if you just swap out the word hiking for investing, I feel like the investing community has been that for us. When we first started attending events and trying to figure out, like, we want to change our lives. How do we do this? And people who were so welcoming and knew the same people we knew or had been to the same places we knew, and having that common goal of gaining control of our time. Because it's not about gaining control of money. You need control of money to get control of time. But then they start thinking, how can I help people? How can I pay it forward? How can I give back? And I see this happen in the investing community again, and again, and again. And outside the investing community, what always impresses me is people who are really not as frankly obsessed with the passive income as we are serving and not making excuses. And I think that's what really drives it home in these different hikers who are out there on trail. If the only people who could hike this trail were the people who had passive income, right? There wouldn't be very many people on trail. It's people who are just out there not making excuses. They're saying, "This is something I really wanna do. I don't know how I'm gonna make it happen, but I will figure something out." And every single person has that story of, "I figured it out, and it looks different for everybody." So inside the investing community, it's the same thing. It's like paying it forward. How can we help each other? How can we make something happen? How can we create something out of nothing? And meeting all the people and recognizing it's more about who you know than how you do things and how you can make things happen. And that's one thing I've really found an affinity with both of these communities. So I'm always excited when I find somebody in the hiking community who's also an investor because it's like coming together with these different cultures and the same good parts of both overlapping. And you've just really embodied that. You found something you wanted to do, found something that you thought would be rewarding. It certainly has been from the way you've described it. It's really inspiring. Anybody who wants to get out there, just go make it happen. Stop waiting until you're richer. Stop waiting
Yep.
until you're younger because that's never going to happen. Stop waiting until you're healthier. Stop waiting. Just figure it out and go make
Yep.
it happen. And you really embody that.
Thanks. And that's 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, my very best friend in the world passed away very unexpectedly. And I think when that happened, I just changed. It was like we have to stop waiting because we don't know what tomorrow holds. And tomorrow's not promised to us. And so if I wait till my husband gets home from a deployment a year from now, all of the adventures I'm gonna miss because I was sitting in my home, not that person. And especially now I'm no longer that person because I could get in my car today to go to the gym and then go out with friends later today, and some dingbat who's not paying attention could T-bone me and take my life. And so if we wait, we're missing the adventure.
Mm.
That's the thing. We just can't wait. You just grab it by the horns and run as fast as you can. And
Yeah.
don't let anything, I'm like I said, I'm one of those people. I could sit on a couch all day long and get paid by the government on disability and that is never in my life going to happen because there's too many things to still see in this world.
Yeah, and you're figuring it out. You figured out how to become a hiker, how to become part of the hiker community, to get out there on trail yourself in the way that you can. And again, just figuring it out, saying, "This is what I want," and mapping out a path to get there, the trail to get there. So I really appreciate you taking some time to spend some time with us. I just want to tell people's interesting stories. A lot of the guests that we have on the show, I always ask, is there a product or a service or something that you would like to tell our audience about? But there's just something different when somebody comes and spends an hour with us who has nothing to gain, nothing to sell. You just are out there just doing it for the love of it. And I think that's just a really inspiring story. And I appreciate you coming and inspiring our community and our listeners with living life and just making it happen. So appreciate that.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. And if you hike the Arizona Trail, come see Jeff and Q and Kearney.
Awesome. Yeah, have a good time in Europe. Say hi to Jeff for us. Well, she just hit the nail on the head there, didn't she? With the love of the outdoors and the great effect that it has on our mental health and our ability to just rethink everything, rethink life. That's really why we went out on the trail. And for a long time, I struggled feeling like we were kind of useless or pointless. And we're just hiking, we're just walking outside. And especially when people were reaching out to help us or offer us trail magic, I felt very uncomfortable accepting it because I felt like we should be able to pay for it ourselves or we shouldn't want to put people out. And then I realized that the whole point of being outdoors was for mental health. And we are now talking about planning some legs of our trips to be able to go near some trails and do some trail magic as part of our way to pay it forward and give back. And it's just this cycle of people just living good lives, helping when they can or accepting help when they need to, that continues on and just builds this big adventure. It was really a life-changing experience for us to be out on trail for 3 months, living out of a backpack for 3 months, and being able to then deconstruct our lives down to the most basic things and then slowly put it back together one thing at a time so that we could figure out what was really important to us. Because when you're living on passive income, especially in the early days of retirement, when there's not as much income now as there will be down the future, as those investments continue to grow, it's really important to make sure that we're spending our money on only the things that we absolutely need or the things that bring us the most joy and the most happiness. For us, that's definitely been experiences over things and people over things. So I encourage you to do what Q did, even do what we did, and get yourself an adventure that is motivating to you, that's really going to help you discover the most important things in life. Figure that out. Go do it. Don't make excuses. Make it happen. Stop waiting because there's never going to be a perfect time. We want to help you along on that journey, either through our passive income fund, where you can invest right alongside us with the things that we're investing in for our own early retirement. And if you want to be a little bit more hands on, because you have some skills that maybe you can build something a little bit faster or you can get better returns if you're going to put not only your money in, but your time in, we have a free weekly club that meets every Monday night at 6 p.m. Mountain, where we look at deals together and create joint ventures. So you want to check that out at riseclubcapital.com or check out our fund at partnerwithrise.com. We're looking forward to hearing more from you after the show, getting to know you better, getting to know you, your financial goals, your adventure goals, your service goals, so that we can help you go on your next passive income adventure. Until next time.